Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some ProRevenge. Our first story today comes to us from Call Me Swellington. I was fired for inadvertently stumbling on my boss's malfeasance. I used his obsession with golf and watches to get him fired. Let's jump right in. This was in the last throes of the analog mid-90s. Fax machines, FedEx, dial-up computing, and voicemail were the most common business tools. I was a young regional sales manager for a major branded consumer product. I covered the grocery class of trade in 11 western states. My division worked out of Chicago, and I had a home office on the West Coast. I had made my reputation by basically making my quota and keeping costs within budget. I would get reassigned to struggling markets, and more often than not, I would usually make my sales numbers. Nothing too fancy, I just figured where the best opportunities were and concentrated on them. In those days, we had something called Market Development Funds, MDF, or as we called it, Marking Days Fund, in the time before such things were deemed illegal. It was money we could literally use for almost anything you could imagine. Wining and dining, sending buyers to the Super Bowl, taking them on market research trips. I once took 6 honchos for a weekend of fishing in Mexico. As long as you had the receipts and your boss knew, except in cases where they specifically asked not to know, we were free to spend money as we saw fit. This was old school Mad Men style slush funds, all tax deductible. Typically, the MDF money was 2% of your total annual gross sales and was use it or lose it, meaning it had to be spent because it wouldn't roll over. I always had some left over. As a team player, I would let my boss, Sasquatch, know so he could use it. No big deal. Towards the end of the year, my weekly FedEx pack from the company started including sign-offs for payments to a supplier I had never heard of before. What was weird is they were for a demo company that wasn't one of my regional suppliers. If you've ever been offered a sample or a coupon in a grocery store, that was a demo company. I called the broker and agent in that market and learned that they had never used the company or even heard of them. I finally figured out that they were from Sasquatch and that he had thrown them in with my other sign-offs. I called him and asked if he knew what they were. He said they should be assigned to my MDF and not to worry about them. This was a little unusual because demos would normally be taken out of other monies or came down from marketing. Whatever, I signed off on them. Hung out to dry. About 3 months later, I was called into HQ for a meeting where I was told I was being transferred to a market that I had never worked before and would be required to relocate. At the time, my wife was pregnant, read her ProRevenge story in my feed, and we just started an extensive remodel on our newly purchased house. The company had some relocation benefits, but it was just too hectic to pull up roots and move to the southeast. I declined the offer and was told that I could look for another job within the company or receive a severance package. I wound up taking the severance. The truth comes to light. Several months later, one of my ex-coworkers told me that my region had been taken over by one of Sasquatch's past work associates, who he managed to get hired in my spot, and that the region was tanking badly. Nothing made sense. Why was I terminated and then replaced by someone who lived in another city and who couldn't do the job? I started to think in my naivety that I may have put a target on my back. After some research and digging, which was much harder before the internet, I learned that the demo company billing the MDF was based in my ex-boss's previous city and was just a PO box, a telephone, and a DBA registered by the new person in my job. I later found out it was his girlfriend or mistress. I was livid. Like most people, I tend to plan revenge in my head, but never really go through with it. Most of the time, it's a coping mechanism and not very useful in moving on past being wronged. But this was so egregious, so uncalled for, and so disruptive to my life that I felt I had to get even. My plan evolved to take this guy down, whatever the time it took, whatever the cost in lives or money. I was going to get this mofo. I may have been able to rat him out to the company, but they might have dismissed my complaint as coming from a disgruntled ex-employee with an axe to grind. The hook. I decided that I was going to approach the guy as a phony recruiter, not just a guy collecting resumes, but as a retained corporate headhunter, someone paid to onboard people for big jobs. I had spent a year early in my career working for a super exclusive headhunting firm and knew exactly what transpired in the process. My subterfuge required international telexes, phony letterhead, faked English accents, and overseas friends to do my bidding. Sasquatch was obsessed with expensive watches and golf. He played regularly and watched pro golf both on TV and live. He would incessantly chatter on about both subjects. To bait him, I arranged for him to be approached for an executive position with a major Swiss watch company for a position tied to pro golf and other swanky sports, sponsorships, and included a shopping list of benefits and prerequisites. The job would require hobnobbing with major sports organizers, flying around the world, first class naturally, and basically spending money. It was a job he could only dream of. The setup. In the slow and methodical long con, I strung him along until the time was right to close with an offer. The only catch was that he had to report to Switzerland for final offer and onboarding. I deliberately scheduled it for the week of the old jobs division meetings and reporting. They were mandatory and impossible to miss without raising red flags. Sasquatch was worried that his absence would be impossible to cover, especially if he was out of the country. The headhunting firm said that they could move the appointment up a few days so that he would be able to attend his meeting, but that he would need to purchase an unrestricted business class seat and make his own hotel reservations. Save your receipts, and the watch company will reimburse you, he was told. Sasquatch showed up to his swanky hotel suite using his own credit card for the big money room, and promptly received a note from the watch company that his appointment had to be rescheduled for the following Monday because of a major corporate crisis. Sasquatch called the phony recruiter in a panic about missing the corporate meetings back in the States. It was agreed that he would call in sick and that whatever happened with the old job, he was heading to much greener fairways. Enjoy your weekend in Europe. By Monday, you'll be in your dream job. The sting. While Sasquatch was cooling his jets in Europe, I nonchalantly called his boss, the president of the division, and casually asked for a reference on Sasquatch's work ethic and dates of employment. You'd be surprised how often this mistake happens. The president, to his credit, didn't tip his hand or act very surprised by the call, but like a good corporate wonk, he referred me to human resources. I let it slip that he was in Europe finalizing his new job, and that he'd already given the company notice. My bad. Bloody aftermath and how the Revenge overstepped its original mission. Eventually, I was able to put together the aftermath from old coworkers and other people in the trade who did not know I was the Revenge Ninja. When Monday came and went, Sasquatch must have been apoplectic. This is to be assumed since we had cut all communications to let him twist in the wind, because we received at least 20 calls to the exchange and multiple faxes. Sasquatch hung around the hotel for a day or two and then finally decided to leave for home. I assume at some point he may have contacted the watch company, but I never confirmed it. When he finally got home, he found his office had been packed up and left with his wife. An HR person met him off-site to give him his severance and retrieve the car and other company property. I heard his wife left him sometime later, and his mistress was fired for theft. I figure he spent at least $10,000 on travel and hotels. Epilogue. I wish I could say I tipped my hand and told Sasquatch that I was the author of his demise, but it really served no purpose, and in theory, may have exposed me to some retribution of my own. By my moral lodestar, I got even with a thief who was content to steal and take my livelihood. That was plenty. It was commented down below that he must have gone crazy in that hotel room, and OP replied with, "The slow realization that he had been screwed still warms me on cold nights. That was actually the one time when I thought I should call him at the hotel. Hey Sasquatch, it's OP. How did I know you were in a Swiss hotel? I was the guy that sent you there. You should call work too. They're looking for you." I absolutely love it when karma is applied in a situation, but with interest. Now, OP mentioned earlier in this story that his wife had a ProRevenge story as well. And so I looked that one up. Here it is, again, from Call Me Swellington. The Girl Friday with the PhD takes over the business from ungrateful owner. Let's jump right in. This is a long tale. It is also a textbook case of why you don't abuse loyal associates. My spouse was the second person hired at a consulting company in a very specialized industry. In her 15 years with the firm, it grew to a respectable 3-office entity, 8 to 10 employees at each location. She and the owner grew the business on the contacts, expertise, and presentation of my wife, to the extent that my wife's abilities and education were the main reason new business came through the door. Over the years, her scope of responsibility grew so that the owner was basically 75% absent and mostly unaware of day-to-day activity. As he got more and more removed from the business, he would make overtures that he would eventually retire and sell her the business. He was so dependent on her income generating that he took out a life insurance policy on her. I did not involve myself too much, but at a major industry dinner party I attended with her, he introduced my wife to the table as My Girl Friday, basically a secretary, which was weird. Over the years, she tried to get an agreement in place to buy the firm, even if it was years away. He always delayed and made promises, but never followed through. I told her, this guy doesn't respect you or your contribution. He will never sell you the business because there is no reason to. He can make more money by stringing you along. And essentially, you are the business. Why would he sell it to you? One day, out of the blue, my wife received a raise and bonus, a very minor amount of money, and a contract that included a non-compete, non-disclosure agreement. After reading it, she realized that the owner was trying to lock her down from leaving for another firm. She had been getting feelers from other companies. To make things even more suspicious, she received a call from a competitor who said they were in final stages of due diligence and they wanted to meet her. The butthole was selling the company and didn't think to tell her or ask her if she was interested in buying it. She ignored the agreement, and there were no other agreements in place. She was totally free. My wife is extremely loyal. She has missed so many special days working for this guy, stuck around when they were wobbly, even skipped paychecks when there were tough financial times. She was furious, the absolute maddest I've ever seen her. We discussed starting her own firm, and I asked, how much business is contractually obligated to stay there if you leave? It turned out that most agreements were either handshakes or 30-day at will. I also asked how many would leave with you. She said about 75%, including her biggest source of revenue, who didn't even know the owner. In a very short time, my wife took a 3-week vacation. She had months of unused time, during which time she rented an office in the same building and made all the arrangements to set up a new shop. She agreed to leave any and all company property behind and do her best to give the old company no obvious ammo for litigation. She called her clients and said, I'm leaving. If you want to look into relocating your account with my new company, you'll need to quit the old one before we can discuss it. Most understood the implication. While she was on vacation, she received a panicked call from her boss. We lost such and such company. Do you know anything about it? She said, I'm sorry, but I just sent you an email. I've resigned. All my keys and company stuff is on my desk. Bye-bye. The new firm took basically 90% of the business and seamlessly transitioned into the same company as it was before, but with a new owner. Even most of the office staff would come aboard. Within a year, her old company closed down except for the small office her old boss ran. She sees him once in a while and he just scowls at her. I think people give loyalty to a company way too much weight. If you're able to better yourself and take a better offer at a different company, then do it. There's nothing keeping you at that old company. If they really want to keep you around, they'll be willing to pay for you. So give them that chance. Say, hey, I'm gonna get better money at this company, so what are you willing to do for me? Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our last story today comes to us from Brew Boo. Steal my money and then become hostile when I ask for a refund? Have fun with that felony on your record. Let's jump right in. This happened a few years ago, right after I graduated college. I would make an 8-hour drive home a few times a year to see family, usually over the holidays. During these trips, there was only wilderness, fields, mountains, and tiny little towns along the way. During one of these trips, I stopped at a gas station to get some food, and I apparently lost my debit card, or it was stolen. It was a card I never used and looked identical to my main one, so I didn't notice it missing until later when I got a call from my bank and I see my account overdrafted. Being fresh out of college making $12 an hour, the $400 was a huge deal. I worked at a credit card processor at the time, so I had a very unusual familiarity with how credit card transactions worked. This was a debit card but ran as credit. I could have done a chargeback, of course, but I knew that merchants were fined $15 for each chargeback on top of the return and got a ding on their record with Visa, MasterCard, or Amex. If they had too many chargebacks, they would have their processing revoked and incur heavy fines. Merchants are usually mom and pop shops and are usually innocent in the matter, so I decide to give them a call. Also, the charges all came from the same gas station that I lost it at, so I suspected it was an employee who found and stole my card and was stupid enough to use it at work. I wanted to let the manager and owners know so they could keep an eye out for unscrupulous employees. Employee theft is unfortunately common and is not brought to light until a customer brings it up. I thought I would just give them a call and ask for the refund, easy. I call and a woman answers. I asked to speak with the manager and she says she is the manager. I explained that I had lost my card at that location and someone had later used my card there. I said I didn't want to accuse anyone, but I think one of her employees had the card and she might want to investigate. I also said I'd like a return for all the purchases to save them the hassle of a chargeback. When I usually work with managers in this situation, they're very willing to help and take employee theft very seriously. Instead, I'm met with hostility and insults. She told me I probably deserved it for losing my card in the first place and not noticing, and I deserved this lesson. She interrupted me and told me to basically go F myself, and none of her employees would steal. Getting a bad feeling, I ask for the number of the owner. She says there is no owner. What? By now, I'm shaking in anger, so I tell her I'm calling the police and hang up. She tries to call back and I don't answer. By now, I'm angry crying. I have a feeling I know who did it, but now I need to prove it. I had no intention of calling the cops because what cops care about some petty credit card theft? It's incredibly hard to prove, and most cops have murder and crap to worry about. Lucky for me, this is in the middle of nowhere, population 100 or something. First, I call my bank and ask if they have the record of the exact times the card was used. They gave me the times down to the minute. I then call the police and get a very friendly woman. It seems she's not busy and actually listens to my story, including the hostile manager. I ask if she's able to go look at the surveillance tapes or something. She says the store is 5 minutes away and she will stop by. I guess she felt sorry for me or was bored, but I'll take it. She says she'll give me a call if she finds anything. I eagerly await her call but was not expecting much. A couple days go by and I get a call from the nice officer lady. She says that she went by the store and reviewed the footage. At the exact times I told her, the cameras caught the hostile manager making the purchases, signing receipts for the exact same amounts with a card that looked exactly like mine. Even better, they were going to charge her with felony identity theft since making purchases on someone's card without permission is identity theft on top of monetary theft, at least in my state. They asked if I wanted any restitution, but my bank had refunded me the stolen money, so I declined. I was absolutely not expecting a cop to go out of their way to help me, and I was definitely not expecting it to result in an arrest. I felt a sense of pride for actually sticking up for myself and not just taking the money from my bank and letting the thief go. I'm a pretty small and non-confrontational person, but that day I felt like a badass. If she'd been nice and worked with me or even just apologized and done the returns, I would not have called the cops. Because she was so rude and unhelpful, she got a felony instead. It's very true that employee theft can cause some major problems, especially in smaller businesses. I've worked in one where there's been a couple of them. In one case, an employee would swipe their own rewards card every time somebody went to get fuel and didn't have one of their own. Yep, fired. And then there was another one that figured out how to take money out of the till without it being on record, and they got almost $10,000 over the course of a few months. Fired and charged. Back to the story though, can we take a moment just to think about this manager who committed a felony at her place of employment while completely on camera? You're not too bright, are you? Check out both OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.